importantly, no more quizzes. So we are all happy
Oh,
about that.
that's so sad for you. I will just randomly call you with a pop quiz.
No.
Hi, I'm Ryan. I'm a science teacher.
I'm Cheryl, and I slept through science.
Each episode will tackle a science question you may have learned in school, but can't quite remember or fully explain.
And I'll take the risk of asking the dumb questions so that we can all understand the science we slept through.
The bell has rung. Let's get started.
Welcome to lesson 94. I don't know. What are we doing, Cheryl?
We're not in a unit.
We're done. I'm not really running any. I don't know what's happening. What's happening?
School's almost out.
School is almost out.
Yeah, so it's one of those weird school days where you're like, I don't know, there's still class today, but we kind of did wrap everything up already. So like, why are we here? We're probably going to kind of be checked out, but that's fine. We are at the conclusion of our podcast, Ryan.
We are. We've reached the end. This is our last episode.
Yeah.
Our last lesson. Your last chance to learn. After this, all learning stops.
Shut it down. No more learning.
That's right.
But
None.
more importantly, no more quizzes. So we are all happy with that. part of it. Yeah.
That's so sad for you. I will just randomly call you with a pop quiz.
No.
I wouldn't do that.
You can randomly call me with fun science facts because I would love that.
Okay.
But no follow-up questions. So we are going to do something today that's different than what we've done on this podcast. In this podcast, we've spent like 20 or so minutes diving into a specific question.
Yeah.
Like really specific, which has been so fun. I've liked that a lot, like really diving into a topic. We're going to do the opposite of that today.
Okay.
And we are going to try to cover as many questions as we can with our remaining lesson. So,
Okay.
you and I are both very organized people. We have a Google Doc. It has multiple little tabs going on this big old spreadsheet.
Well, it's a spreadsheet. Yeah.
Yes. And so the main spreadsheet page has all of our lessons and the date that we record them and the date we release them and blah, 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 blah. And then we have another little tab or worksheet within that spreadsheet that is all these like future ideas of topics that we might want to cover. Few from listeners, some from you, some from me, just as we go about our lives and we think of things. And what we're going to do today is cram for finals by briefly covering as many of these as we possibly can. You have done no preparation for this other than be a science teacher for what, 20 years?
I didn't
something like that.
even, almost 18. I didn't even look at the spreadsheet ahead of time.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I've seen
proud.
it and I've looked at the questions at some point in time. So it's not like I've never seen these, but it's been a while since I've looked at the list. So and I don't know how many we're going to get through. I don't know how many are on the list. I don't know which ones you're going to do. I don't know what order you're going in. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Oh my gosh. I love it. I love it all.
Do you want to make any guesses as to how many we're going to be able to get through?
Ooh, okay. I'm going to tell you the total number that is on this list.
That we haven't done yet.
Correct. That we haven't done yet. So we are looking at 108 questions.
That does not surprise me.
Okay. And this is after me going in through and deleting some as well.
I believe that too.
I don't 100% believe that there is not also duplicate on here somewhere, so we will find out.
Okay. So roughly 100 questions.
Yeah, about 100 questions. And I think we're going to do maybe we'll do a timer of some sort. We'll be keeping our eyes on the clock at least. So we're just going to see.
Yeah.
So this is not time to dive deep, Ryan.
No, which is going to be hard for me.
Not time to screen share. This is time for brief synopses And
Uh-huh.
I'm going to try my very best to not ask follow-up questions unless they're like very good follow-up questions. If
Okay.
they're like killer, like you're like, oh no, that was actually a very good follow-up, but then maybe, but I'll
Okay.
try to keep it brief. And I think we're just going to see how far we get.
Okay. Do you have a prediction? Because I have a number in my head. Do you have a prediction?
My number is 50.
Okay. My number is 20. We'll see. We'll probably both be wrong, but we'll
My
see how it goes.
first thought was 25, and then I bumped it up
Uh-huh.
to 50.
Okay. Well, you've also looked at the questions more recently. So,
Yikes.
and I pulled up a stopwatch on my phone. So I'll be timing it as we go.
Amazing. I should probably, no, I'll let you do that. That's fine. That can be your contribution other than answering all of my questions very quickly, but
Uh-huh.
yeah. Yeah. So I think we're just going to jump right in.
Okay. Go for
and
it. Question
we
1.
shall see how it goes. Ryan, why do
Yes.
our ears pop on planes?
Because of the changing pressure.
Great. What's the deal?
You wanted a short answer.
Yep. No, I love it. Here we go. What's the deal with hiccups?
That is your diaphragm having a spasm.
But why?
For the same reason that any part of your body has a spasm. It has to do with an imbalance sometimes in specific electrolytes, but that's not the word I'm looking for. I can't remember neurotransmitters. So oftentimes potassium, it often can be related to potassium. And so neurotransmitters is the wrong word too. Ions. Yeah. But yeah, so you know how like sometimes you can get like a twitch, like the side of your eye or something like that. It's a similar thing. It's just a twitch in your diaphragm, which is a muscle.
Oh, interesting.
Yep.
That's so cool. When I am tired, why is my voice deeper?
I don't know.
Ooh, okay. Okay. Why do onions make me cry?
Because when you slice the onion, it releases some compounds that are in the onion that our eyes are extra sensitive to. And so they become aerosolized, or they go up into the air, and our eyes are extra, extra sensitive. And tears are a way of kind of like mucus in like your nose of like flushing out things that aren't supposed to be there.
So is it almost like having an allergic reaction to something, as far as like your body's just like having this response, or like sneezing when you breathe in dust?
Yes, like sneezing when you breathe in dust. Allergic reactions are a different thing, because the allergic reaction is an immune response.
Oh, okay.
And this
Can I
is
tell
not
you my
really
favorite definition of allergy?
Yeah.
An unnecessary reaction to a harmless substance.
I mean, that's not wrong.
It's so good because it makes people with allergies sound ridiculous, and I love it so much. Why is it that when a woman is pregnant, you can tell she is through her pee? Like, why can she pee on a stick and that works?
Yep, I gotcha. It's all about hormones. When a woman is pregnant, there are a bunch of changes that are happening internally to change like the uterus and a whole bunch of other things to make the inside of the reproductive tract able to grow a human. And a lot of those release different amounts or types of hormones, and they don't just go in the reproductive system. And because the way hormones move around your body is the way anything moves around your body, the bloodstream. And if there's extras, anything that's extra, what filters your blood is the kidneys. And so they filter stuff out of your blood, and anything that's extra that needs to be gotten rid of goes into your urine, your pee, and then exits your body.
So it's just like the concentration of hormones compared to like a normal woman's.
Probably, although there could be unique hormones as well. I don't know. I'd have to look it up.
Interesting. This is killing you, isn't it?
I did great on the first one.
No, you're doing amazing. You're doing a great job. Here's one from one of our listeners, my sister Katie, that we have not answered. And
Okay.
I clearly copy and pasted this one because it starts with the word in. So, in areas without trees, the desert, for instance, is the air
Okay.
quality worse or is there a lower amount of oxygen since there aren't as many trees around to produce it?
There's two layers to that question. The first question is the air quality worse? And that is kind of subjective. How are we, it all depends on how are we defining air quality. I
Mm.
mean, there's not as much pollution because there aren't as many people, unless you're
Oh,
like in Vegas, I guess.
yeah.
Right? Like unless you're in like populated desert area, but if you're like in the Sahara Desert where there are huge swaths where there's no people, it's not worse air quality in that sense. But
Mm.
I think based on the second part of the question, she's asking about oxygen levels more so that, and maybe that as a way of determining the air quality. And while on one level, could there be lower oxygen? Again, I don't actually know the answer. I'm giving my best guess here. Could there be lower oxygen than, say, a rainforest? Probably. However, oxygen is a gas, and a gas diffuses and spreads out in the air from
Mm.
where there's a high concentration to low concentration. We've talked about that before.
Yeah.
And with winds and all of those sorts of things, the air is constantly mixing and churning. And I don't think that it's the case that like there are parts of the earth that have a significant enough difference in oxygen that it matters unless we're talking about elevation, like that it
Okay.
would affect us
Yeah.
as humans. So
Interesting.
could there be a lower oxygen content in that area? I think the answer would be yes, but I don't think that it would be a big enough difference that you could tell, because there's other things that affect oxygen levels as well. Like I said, elevation, that has a pretty big impact. That's why like when you go up high somewhere, you like get winded more easily because there's actually less oxygen. But also the temperature of the air can change how much oxygen can be in it and other things. So it's more
Interesting.
complex than just are there plants or not.
Got it. So maybe it's even a similar thing to when we talked about house plants. Like if I have a house plant,
Mm-hmm.
is it giving my house more oxygen? Like perhaps, but on such a tiny, tiny level that we're never
Mm-hmm.
actually going to see a difference.
Yeah,
Interesting.
that would be my guess.
Got
Mm-hmm.
it. Second question from Katie,
Mm-hmm.
because I put these in two different ones. So this one starts on a related note. How does rain improve air quality? When it rains here, the air quality gets better. And with long
Mm-hmm.
periods without rain, air quality declines. So does the rain,
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote, wash the air? And do the particles get captured in the raindrops?
Yes, that's exactly what happens.
Good
As
job,
the
Katie.
raindrops fall through the air, they are falling through the air, and some of the stuff that's in the air goes into the water, into the raindrops, and
Mm.
then they land on the ground and then they flow down with everything else because the particles that are in the air that are bad for the air, if you will, are generally uh, not gases, although some of them are, but oftentimes they're solids, but they're just really, really
Oh,
tiny, like smog and things like that, that makes like gross air that we would see and be like, oh, that's gross. That's usually, or like smoke. We've had that a lot in
yeah.
like the end of the summer, early fall here in the Pacific Northwest and other parts of the country as well. Like that's all little tiny, tiny, tiny bits of
Solids.
actual solids that can get them
Yeah.
picked up, brought to the ground, and then washed into the dirt or wherever they end up going.
Cool.
So yeah, Katie's right.
Good job, Katie.
Way to go,
Um,
Katie. Gold star.
yay. What is a brain freeze?
Brain freeze, like with ice cream or when you like eat something really,
Yeah.
really cold. And
Yeah.
when you say what is, you mean like what causes, like what's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
Last I checked, we don't know completely for sure. What we think, what I remember reading about what we think is happening is it has to do with blood vessels that are constricting faster than they normally do. And so because your blood vessels can actually get larger and smaller, and they do that on purpose, to help regulate body temperature. That's why when you're really, really hot, if you have a fairer skin tone, you often will get red and flushed. That's because it's called vasodilation. So your blood vessels are actually getting wider to allow more blood towards the surface of your skin to release more heat from your body.
And
that's also why when you get really, really cold, you can your lips can turn different colors, or your fingers, or they turn white. They have less color, is because that's vasoconstriction. Your blood vessels constrict to let less blood reach the surface so that you don't lose as much body heat.
Oh my gosh. So it's just your body protecting you.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And so if when you eat something cold, what one possibility is in your mouth or the back of your throat or something, if it's really cold, all of a sudden your blood vessels might start constricting, and that can cause things if it prevents some of the blood flowing to your brain, or and that's where it's is it actually your brain? Probably not. There's probably other things, and it could be referred pain and stuff like that. But I don't know for sure. And last I checked, we don't 100% know for sure either. It's still something that is being researched, but that's what they think it's related to.
That's so cool. That's interesting.
This is probably a moment where I should just put out there for the rest of the podcast that I am going without looking anything up, which means I could be completely wrong for some of these things. So if you're I don't think that's actually the way it works, well, go ahead and look it up and double check me, because I'm doing my best.
Amazing. Why is my bubbly bubbly?
What?
The drink bubbly, it's carbonated. Tell me about carbonation. I do not understand for the life of me how carbonation works. I open a can and then all of a sudden there's these bubbles. What?
Yep. It's a supersaturated solution. What you've done is you've put more of, in the case of carbonation, it's carbon dioxide, into that liquid than it is normally able to hold. And often they will do that by putting it under pressure, because the pressure of something controls how much of that of another thing can dissolve into a liquid. And so as soon as you release that pressure, so there's not pressure keeping more of that from coming out. So this thing called vapor pressure. Every substance has a vapor pressure. The pressure at which the same amount of that substance is evaporating as is recondensing back down when that's in balance. But so what happens is all of that carbon dioxide is already in the liquid, whether it's, a champagne, or it's a LaCroix, or it's a Coke, or whatever. There's carbon dioxide in there. And once you release that pressure, there's more of it than what that liquid normally holds. So it starts to come out of solution. And that's where the bubbles come from. And then you can also, this is not a question you're asking, but I'm adding it on as a bonus.
Amazing.
If you remember the big craze quite a few years ago at this point, probably at least 10 years ago, the kind of Diet Coke and Mentos, where you would take a Mentos and you would drop it in, right? You can create what's called a nucleation site. If you put other things into that liquid that the carbon dioxide can basically latch onto, it will pull it out of the solution much faster. And so you can add things that it can attach to that'll pull it out of solution more easily. And that's also why often the bubbles are along the side. Not all of them are, but along the side of the can or whatever, because there's something that on a molecular level, it's rougher. And so there's things that the carbon dioxide can actually start to attach to. And then once there's enough of it that gets all together, that's where you form a little bubble. And once it becomes less dense than the liquid around it, up it goes.
Wow. That's so cool. Tell me about steam burns. Why are steam burns worse than the air temperature?
Because steam, and I'm pretty sure we talked about this, because steam, what we call steam, is actually liquid water. It is when you see steam coming off of a boiling pot of water, that what you actually see are little tiny water droplets of liquid water, just like a cloud might be droplets of liquid water. And a liquid will transfer heat much more efficiently than a gas will. And so a steam burn is, those are the molecules that are almost boiling temperature. They're technically not because they're a liquid again, but they are right around that boiling temperature, and they are just slamming into your hand or your face or whatever and transferring all of that heat energy into your skin, and that can burn you. So it's not quite as bad as if, let's say, you were to take your hand and stick it in a pot of boiling water, because there's so much more there. It's going to transfer more of that heat energy, but it's kind of like the next worst thing.
Interesting. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I want to talk about caramelizing onions.
Okay.
Because caramelized onions are delicious.
Agreed.
I've heard that there's something like chemical that happens in the process of caramelizing, and that's why they taste different, is because like something about sugars. What's the deal with caramelization?
So caramelization is a process that happens to sugar. And I don't remember molecularly exactly what it is. Okay. I have looked it up and I have understood it, but I have not retained it. But it is actually a change to what's happening to the sugar. I think it's burned, but like not to a certain extent. So like that's why the longer. Yeah, exactly. You are actually getting rid of some of the material and just have carbon left over. But once you reach a certain level, that's when we would call it burned. That's when it starts to quote unquote taste burned. But if you just have a small amount of it mixed in with other things, that's what we refer to as being caramelized, I think. But I'm only 70% confident on that answer. So yeah, my confidence level is lower on that.
All good.
Okay.
Why can breathalyzer tests not be faked? Like if you're drunk.
Yeah. No, I got that. What do you mean they can't be? Are you sure they can't be faked?
I don't think they can. Like I thought like they're like foolproof. Like if your breath shows that you're drunk, then you're drunk. Like it's a surefire way to know the level of intoxication.
Maybe. Well, so let's take a step back. What's happening is alcohol, you ingest the alcohol, anything that you ingest that your body absorbs goes into the blood, kind of like we talked about with whatever it was we just talked about that goes out in the urine, hormones.
Yeah.
Right? So the blood is the way you get things around your body. So if you ingest something and if your intestines absorb it, it goes into your bloodstream. So you ingest the alcohol, it gets absorbed through your intestines, it goes into the blood. That's why it can get to the brain and can affect you and all the feelings and all of the things. So the blood also goes other places, like to your lungs, because that's part of the process, is your blood going to your lungs. And so I believe, and this is again where I'm like not 100% confident on this one, but I believe alcohol, well, I do know alcohol is a relatively small molecule. It's not a super big one. And I think it may just naturally diffuse from the blood into your alveoli, just like carbon dioxide does. And that because alcohol has it vaporizes really easily. And so I think that's why it then gets exhaled from you, I think. And so that's the first part, is like, why can you use a breathalyzer in the first place? And then the second part is, why can't you fool it? And that's the one where I'm like, I would guess that there probably would be a way to like to mask or like to but maybe not. Maybe there's no way to do that. Well, I'll bet you if you had enough money, you could find a way to do that. But generally when you're drunk, you don't have enough wherewithal to be able
Sure.
to think about how to do those things or to do them
Well, and that's
right or
probably why it's
whatever.
relied upon then is like that
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
different than like
But
maybe other aspects.
but
Yeah.
typically you don't just do a breathalyzer, right? Like if a cop pulls you over, they're going to have you do a number of tests and like all
Sure.
together, I would
Yeah.
think. But the
Yeah, that's
breathalyzer is
good.
a way to know what your blood alcohol content is, right? Like
Yeah.
what your level of intoxication is versus whether or not you're intoxicated.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Why is my hair turning gray? Like me
As you're
specifically.
getting older.
Okay, got it. Cool.
Sorry, Cheryl.
Why does hair turn gray?
Well, what's happening is the reason your hair is brown is because the follicles, which are at the base of your hair, that makes the hair where it grows and new cells and things, it makes pigment molecules. We've talked a lot about pigment
Yeah.
molecules.
Yeah.
Right? Melanin specifically is one of the ones
Mhm.
that makes things brown. Your hair follicles as you get older stop making melanin.
Oh. It's as
And
simple as
so
that.
your hair
Interesting.
starts to lose its color because you're not producing melanin. That's also partly why it happens in different places at different rates, is because each
Oh.
follicle doesn't do it all at once. It's just this
Mm,
follicle now isn't making melanin anymore. So there's no color being produced there. And then this one
yeah.
isn't, and then this one isn't, and then this one, And so as you get older, more and more of your follicles are no longer producing melanin to
Wow.
go into your hair.
That's really cool. What is plant sex?
Reproduction. Plants reproduce sexually, which means to reproduce sexually means for two different individuals of a particular species to combine their genetic information to make a genetically unique offspring. And
Okay.
so humans do that, obviously. Other mammals do that. Most of the organisms that you can think of that you are most familiar with reproduce sexually, and plants do as well. And so you talked about allergies earlier.
Yeah.
Those people who are allergic to pollen, I don't remember if we've talked about this or not, but pollen is plant sperm.
Oh, okay. Amazing.
So those of us, myself included, who have allergies to different pollens are allergic to the plant sperm.
Okay.
And so those ones in particular are usually wind dispersed. So they're dispersed through the air and they blow to another tree nearby or whatever. And then hopefully that pollen lands on whatever the particular receptacle is on the other plant, that it can then go to the ovaries, because plants have ovaries, not in the same way that we think of them with humans, but yes, and create eggs, which become seeds. And then
Yeah.
you've got a new organism.
Cool. Interesting. How is wood possibly nutritious to bugs? What
What
is
do you
the
mean?
deal? How are
You mean like termites or something? Or
Yeah, like a beetle, like eating a tree, things like that. What? How is that nutritious? Like, how is that what they need?
because they have different enzymes that can break things down that we don't.
Hmm.
Trees, bark, wood, whatever, is still made of carbon. It's still made of a lot of materials that we need to make us, but we don't. A lot of what plants are made of is cellulose, which we are not able to digest. We do not have that in our guts to be able to digest cellulose. And so it is of no value to us because we can't digest it. But there are other organisms that can. And if you can break it down into small enough components, then you can rearrange those components to make the molecules that you need.
Cool. Interesting. Here's one I've wondered for a long time. How does siphoning work? It makes no sense to me.
Magic.
Great. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one is actually more challenging to answer than you might realize. There's the basic answer that you'll find if you search online, and it is part of the answer, but it is not the whole answer. So basically it has to do with air pressure. Because in order to siphon, you generally need one spot, the spot that you're taking the liquid from, to be higher than the spot that you're depositing it. Yes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And so you have to have no air gaps in your hose or tube or whatever.
Yeah.
And then because the air pressure for the thing that's higher, there's slightly less, like the air pressure is different, right? There's slightly less, slightly more, and it actually ends up pushing the water all the way down. But that's not completely the story, because I've watched someone, this was a number of years ago, who then tested this and did it in a vacuum chamber, and the siphon still worked. So it's not just air pressure, but it was slower. So air pressure is a factor, but it's not the only thing. I think one of the components, and I don't remember what the whole thing is, but I think one of the components is also, remember how we talked about water molecules? There's the cohesion, they stick to each other.
Yeah. Yes. They want to stay together.
Yeah. And so if one water molecule is moving in some place, it tugs on and pulls the other one. So I think that is a component. Again, it's not enough on its own, but it's very unique and very weird. But there's other times that aren't water where you see a similar effect. Like, have you ever seen, like, if you have like a chain that, it could be just like a link chain, or it could be like those old, like the little tiny metal beads that used to make like a necklace. You know what I'm talking about? The little, right? Like you can do one of those. And if you have it like in a cup and it's one big long chain and it's all like coiled up, and you get it up and over the edge of the cup and you get it far enough down, then it will actually pull the rest of the chain down. Right. So that's, again, it's not exactly the same process. There's other things involved, but that's a similar thing.
Interesting.
They're analogous to each other.
Wow, that's so cool. Okay, I have another one.
Okay.
Why are cats' eyes a different shape? Like their pupils.
Oh, yeah. Because they tend to be like vertical slits.
Yeah.
Well, the why question has multiple ways of approaching it. The short answer is because evolution. I feel like you want more than that, though.
Yep.
I think, if I remember correctly, the shape of them allows for light, like less light to pass through, so they're more able to see better in low light conditions than we are with our round pupils, I think.
Interesting. That's really cool.
If it's true.
Here's one from our friend and listener, Jeremy. And he asks, how do helicopters even fly, or planes, when there are tons of metal and thousands of pounds of passengers and baggage?
Once again, I'm going to say magic. It has to do with this a thing that I'm sure you've heard of before called lift. An airplane is simpler than a helicopter, so we'll do the basics of that first. So an airplane wing is not like a normal shape. It actually is thicker in the front and narrower in the back, and that's on purpose. Basically, what it does is its shape allows the air to pass over it at different rates. So, and now I'm trying to remember what it is. I want to say that the air going over the top goes slower than the air on the bottom. It's I don't remember which, and that creates a different air pressure. And so then there is a bigger pressure on the bottom of the wing and on the top of the wing, which pushes upwards. And that creates what we call lift.
That's so cool. Have you seen Chicken Run?
Long time ago.
There's a chicken who has like some sort of like a Scottish accent, maybe, or something like that. And she's like, thrust. We need thrust. And she keeps talking about thrust as they're trying to figure out how to fly. And it's very cute. So
that is funny. And then the helicopter issue
Okay.
is a little bit different because now you've got those essentially wings that are the blades, and they're spinning around in a circle, and they're actually pushing the air downwards.
Oh.
Right, because they're not flying forwards. But then
Yeah.
because of the rotation, gosh, I'm trying to think of an example where you may have seen this. I'm not sure, but like because it's rotating, the rest of the helicopter that isn't the blades is going to want to spin the opposite direction. It's Newton's third law. Every action has an opposite reaction.
Yeah.
So that's why they have on the tail the other little smaller propeller.
What?
Because that keeps it from spinning around in a circle all the time. That one is pushing in the opposite direction
It's like
of
a
the
sailboat.
rotation. Kind of, yeah, in the opposite direction that the blades that are spinning are trying to spin the main part of the helicopter.
I didn't even know that why that little one was there. I thought it was just cute. That's so interesting.
That's why too. Yep, it's because it's cute. Mm-hmm.
Why does looking at the road help my car sickness?
It's not so much the road as it is outside. What motion sickness is a motion sickness is the brain not being able to reconcile two different types of signals that it's receiving. Visual signals about your motion and vestibular signals about your motion. So things about like how you're moving. Basically, you have an accelerometer in your head that your body says, hey, you're moving. And when it can tell that you are physically moving through, and I point to your ears because that's where it is. There's like fluid like in your ears that kind of figures that out. But your eyes aren't sending that same signal. The brain gets confused. It's like, wait, I don't understand. Like, what? You're moving. You're not moving. You're moving. You're not moving. And then it makes you feel motion sick because of that. And so if you're like reading in a car, which I cannot do because I get motion sick, then that's like my visual signals are not matching my physical signals. And so my brain freaks out. But if you look up and are looking out, now what you're doing is you're giving that same visual signal. We're like, oh, yes, we are moving. I can see things. They seem to be passing at about the same rate that the internal sensors are also picking up. And so that is why that sometimes helps, although it doesn't always help for me.
No,
I'm
not
already
always,
like, once you get like after a certain point, it's like
too late.
I'm stuck. Thank you.
Yeah.
Which is not
I
fun.
had vertigo a couple years ago.
Oh,
that was horrific.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, because didn't they give you exercise? This is the wrong word, but like things to do with your head and like motions
to get the rocks out.
Well, yeah, to get to readjust the inner vestibular system. Yeah.
It was wild. How do smelling salts work?
I don't know. I'm assuming that it's like a very strong smell that supposedly brings you back because your brain is like, oh no, we need to get away from this thing. It's going to kill us.
Oh, maybe
that would be my guess.
Yeah. Flight response of some sort. Interesting.
That would be my guess.
Why is it that when you take the bark off of a tree, it kills it?
Taking the bark off of a tree does not automatically kill it. There are some trees that actually intentionally lose bark. However, taking too much bark off of a tree, it basically think of the bark kind of like the tree's skin. It's the exterior part that protects it from anything outside that could be bad, and that could hurt it. And so one of the things like pests, insects, things that might want to like eat it or attack it, fungi that might want to try and grow on it. Trees have, so the interior to a plant, and trees especially, they have these two different structures called xylem and phloem. And one of them, the let's see if I remember. I think the xylem is what the water moves through, and the phloem is what the nutrients move through. It's kind of like blood in a sense. It's not really, it's not, but so like the leaves make glucose, and then they have to get to all the rest of the living cells for them to get that energy. And so, but that is very rich in like sugars and things. And so that's why other organisms would want to take them from the tree. And so that is something that the bark is protecting the tree from, is keeping other organisms from trying to get at those things.
Interesting. That's really cool. Why is it that sometimes when you have a cold drink, it sweats on the outside when I didn't put any water on the outside?
Yeah, that's condensation from the air. Usually that happens when there's a pretty big temperature difference, where you've got a really, really cold drink and relatively warm air, because, and the statement I'm going to say is technically incorrect, but it's the easiest way to talk about it. Warm air holds more moisture than cold air does. So if you've got warmer air, there's more water vapor that is in the atmosphere. And when it comes in contact with the really, really cold surface of your glass, that water vapor gets colder and condenses. It goes from a gas to a liquid, and it does that, on the outside of the glass.
That's really cool. Here's another one from Jeremy. How does camouflage work, like chameleons, cuttlefish, and such?
It depends. The different organisms have different ways of doing that. The cuttlefish, I think, is similar to the octopus. They have actual cells called chromatophores, which have different pigments in them, and they can actually like change the size of those pigments.
Ooh,
They can like change the size of, and I don't remember if they're in vacuoles or what, but the things that are holding the pigment, so they can like expand the one that has kind of the brownish one and shrink the one that has the reddish one or whatever. And so they're controlling those on the surface of their skin, and in those different, they can do them in a lot of different patterns to actually change what they look like. I think chameleons also use chromatophores, I think. Yeah, so if that's the type of camouflage we're talking about, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
So cool. But do their eyes have to look at what the thing is, or is there something more like subconscious is maybe not the right word, but like
I don't know. I can tell you that, again, I don't know if this is cuttlefish as well, but octopuses,
they're cool.
They're super cool, but they have, this is not the technical term, but I'm going to call it a non-central nervous system. Each individual arm or leg or whatever you want to call it, in a sense, has its own brain. It can think independently. It doesn't, and make its own independent decisions. It doesn't have to like connect to a central brain. So, and I know it's at least each arm. It might even be each like little suction cup thing that I don't remember.
That's so
but
cool.
Like, yeah, it's a distributive nervous system as opposed to a central nervous system in that sense.
That's so cool.
And so no, I don't think the eyes have to see it.
Yeah.
Because like they can do whatever it is they need to do independently, I think.
I love it. Is the 5-second rule real?
Yes.
Are you
depending
serious?
on what the thing is, depending on what the thing is that has fallen. Like if you have a peanut butter and jelly open-faced sandwich and it falls jelly side down, you don't really want to do that.
Yeah.
But we actually tested this in college in my microbiology class.
Really?
So, it was super fun. And it depends on what you mean by the 5-second rule, but basically any bacteria that you might pick up by dropping something on the ground. First of all, the ground is relatively clean depending on where you are. Like it may have dirt, but dirt in and of itself is actually not that dangerous.
Yeah.
Right? what we're usually worried about are pathogens, things that could make us sick, which is usually bacteria. And there could be a few other things as well. But yes, you could pick up bacteria. But again, the wetter and stickier something is, the more likely it is that you're going to pick something up. But also, even if you did pick something up off of the ground, you're going to immediately eat it, and it won't have had time to get big enough to actually cause you to get sick.
Yeah.
Right. Like, whereas if you have something that went bad, like your milk spoiled, like all of the milk spoiled. So there's all sorts of bacteria in the whole thing that have been growing, and that's why it smells bad and all those things. And so when you ingest that, there's a bunch of it that you're ingesting. Whereas you pick the thing up off the floor. Yeah. Okay. You probably picked up some bacteria, but not that much.
Interesting. That's really cool. Does gum really stay in our stomachs for 7 years?
No.
Cool. Amazing. Okay, so I go to baseball games at the Mariners Stadium sometimes. And when they have the retractable roof, and I've been told that it can be warmer if the roof is on, which I don't totally understand because there's still like open air on the sides. So why is it still warmer with the roof on, even though it's not
It's only warmer with the roof on when it's relatively cold outside. If it's, if it's not sunny, I guess is the better way to put it. Think of the roof like a blanket. Or like clouds. It's the same thing that clouds, like think about the winter here in the Northwest.
Yeah. The clear days are really cold.
The clear days are colder than the cloudy days because what the clouds do, or what the roof does, or what a blanket does, is it actually traps that heat and keeps it from going farther away. And so any heat that's produced in the stadium, like all the body heat from all of the fans that are there, all the restaurants that are producing heat, all of that stuff, right? So all of that gets trapped in the roof, and not all of it, because the sides are open. So it's not like, oh, wow, now it's basically 80 degrees in here when it's 40 degrees outside. Like, no, but it will be warmer with the roof closed than with the roof open.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. That's cool.
Yeah.
Does sugar really make kids more hyper?
No.
Why?
It does not. From my understanding, from what I've read about the studies, is that, sugar can give you energy, but it's not like it gives you energy right away sort of a thing that actually leads to hyperactivity. What they have found is the things that tend to make kids hyper are things that are already high energy, like a birthday party or whatever, when people are doing a lot of crazy things where there is also sugar. And so it's a confirmation bias sort of a thing where, yes, oh my gosh, they gave them sugar and now they're bouncing off the walls and when really you gave them sugar about
social
another
energy,
like within another thing, or they were with a whole bunch of other kids, or they got really excited about whatever the thing was that also had the sugar with it.
Ice cream truck.
And so they've actually done studies to try and control for that. And the amount of hyperactivity directly related to sugar intake is negligible.
Interesting.
Now, I don't remember, I would have to do some looking to find that particular study that I've read, but yeah.
That's really cool. Why do things look black and white in dim lighting?
Oh, yeah. Because the way our eyes work is on the back of our eyes is the retina, which you've probably heard of before.
Yeah.
And we have two types of cells in the retina that are light sensitive: rods and cones.
Okay.
We have three types of cones. Those are the three that detect color: red, green, and blue, RGB. Okay. Rods only detect whether there's light there or not. So it's essentially black and white, essentially. But they detect amounts of light, like how much light is there.
Okay.
We have almost all of the cones that we have are in a central part of our retina called the fovea, which is almost directly behind where the pupil is. So it's basically in our direct line of sight. That's where all of our cones are that detect color. All the rest of the retina is the rods. And the rods are really, really good, and they are sensitive to lower amounts of light than the cones are. So when you're in really, really low light, the rods are the ones that are active because they are sensing how much light there is in general, regardless of its color, regardless of its wavelength. Whereas the cones are only sensitive to very specific colors and very specific wavelengths of light. And so it's because at low light, you can't activate those cones, but the rods, that's what they're designed for. As a side note, also, which you may not have known that this was a thing either, because the cones are only in the fovea in the center and the rods are everywhere else, you actually do not have a great sense of color in your peripheral vision either. We did a lab in college. It was very, very cool. We did a lab in college where you're like, put your head on a thing and there's like this, like a semicircle, a half circle with like degree measurements. And then we had different, like on the end of a straw or something, different colored dots. And you would have to look straight forward, and then you would take the colored dot and start on the edge and move it forward until you could figure out what the color was. And in the edge, you couldn't actually figure out what the color was until it showed up. And I don't remember exactly where it was, but that's what we were measuring. And so, but again, this is where our brains compensate for that. Like we don't notice, we see in color everywhere we look. Well, because everywhere we're looking is directly focused where those cone cells are. And our brain just fills in the details of, well, everything else is color too.
That seems
when really it's not sensing the color.
That seems a lot like plugging your nose and eating, but like if you already know the flavor of what you're eating, then it fills in. But like if you don't know, that's where it's like harder to tell the difference.
Oh, because you listen to Office Ladies podcast too, right?
Yes. The
Did
Skittles
you hear the one with the Skittles? Yeah.
Where they're scented? That was wild.
Well,
they're not flavored,
because some of
they're only scented.
Right, which it's more complicated than that because a large part of flavor is scent. They're actually connected to each other, but yes.
Yeah.
But that's a similar thing. Yeah.
Why does helium make our voices higher?
Because helium is less dense than air. And so when you've inhaled the helium, it's moving up and it's pushing up through your vocal cords. And so it's actually changing their shape a little bit.
And is it actually bad for you?
I mean, if that were to be all that you inhaled, yes, because then you wouldn't be inhaling any oxygen.
But like the whole parent thing of like, don't do that, it's bad for your body.
I mean, only in that it's depriving you of oxygen. The helium itself is not harmful.
Okay. Cool. Why does salt make someone float? Or float easier?
You mean when there's salt in the water?
Yeah.
Yeah, it changes your buoyancy. Let's see. As you dissolve more salt in the water becomes more dense. Like technically the H2O, but the water becomes more dense because there's more stuff in it.
Oh, that makes sense then. Yeah.
And
cool.
Okay, great.
I love it.
You got the rest.
Yes, I totally did. Yeah. How the heck does my Instant Pot work? Like, why is it that when I pressure cook something, it cooks it quicker or cooks it like it's been slow cooking for hours? I know that pressure makes a difference, but that makes no sense to me.
Yep. So this is similar to some of the things that we've been talking about already, where like vapor pressure and things like that. So as you increase the temperature, as you increase the pressure, you actually increase the temperature at which water boils. So what that means is you can actually raise the temperature a lot more under high pressure and still have water be liquid, at which will transfer that heat a lot more quickly.
Oh, because I had wondered, like, well, if this is if it's changing the temperature, then I was trying to figure out like, well, wouldn't we just cook things on a higher heat? But when you cook things on a higher heat, you don't get the same effect. So it's actually
Mm-hmm.
changing. Oh, okay. That's very
Mm-hmm.
cool. Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Do whales drink water?
What do you mean by drink?
Like hydrating, drinking, gulp, gulp, gulp.
I mean, they ingest water, yes.
Is it like, do their bodies need it? Like our bodies need
Yeah.
water?
Mm-hmm.
But they can drink salt water?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that sounds gross. Okay. I don't want to be a whale.
I mean, they
Never
have to
mind.
like have special things to like filter it out and stuff. But yeah,
Interesting. Okay. Okay, Ryan, we've been going for a while.
we have almost
Yeah,
an hour at
I've
this point.
asked you, do you want to know how many questions I've asked you?
I think we're over the 20 that I thought, but for the record, I was watching our time.
Yeah.
And you and I paused for a minute with our recording. And when we were at about the length of our normal podcast, we were only at 15.
Yeah. So your guess was much closer than mine. I've asked you 30 questions.
Okay.
Which I feel really good about, but definitely still not 50. And we are way over our normal time that we go.
Oh, yes.
I'm going to ask you one final question, and then I think we're going to call it so that people don't die.
Okay.
Like, I was going to say boredom, but this is actually fascinating, but it's more like,
I mean,
at a certain point we have to call it.
Yep.
What does it mean when Mercury is in retrograde?
You said I can't. You said that I can't do any screen shares, but it's the last question. Can I do a screen share, please? Can I do a screen share?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
I'll give you special permission. Okay, Ryan, fine.
Okay,
you
Cheryl.
can screen share.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. I mean, it's visual, so I mean, I gotta show you. So this is a program called Stellarium. It's a freeware program. It's very awesome. It simulates the night sky. Or the day sky in this case, because you'll see there's the sun. Mercury gets really close to the sun. It never gets very, very far away from the sun. So I'm trying to simplify this for time.
That checks out. It's closer, yeah.
Yeah. So here's Mercury, which I've got the little crosshairs on it. And when you go from one night to the next, okay, so if I go so this is here in December when we're recording this. And as I go, you'll notice that Mercury changes its position.
Oh yeah.
Right? From night to night. Okay.
Yes.
Which that's its orbit, which is great. But if we do this just right, you should notice. Oh, wrong button. Helps if I hit the right button. Oh, it just went down below the horizon.
There it is.
Now I
see Mercury.
But now it's going backwards. Do you see that? It's going the opposite direction from the direction that it was going.
Yeah, because it's
going
orbiting, but we see it go to the right, and then we see it go to the left.
So it's going to the left right now, and then it's going to hit the part where it's the farthest away in its orbit.
Yep.
And then it's going to turn around. Now it's going to go the other direction.
Oh, and then it's on the far side of the sun from us.
Yep.
And then it comes back to closer to us than the sun is.
Yep.
Okay.
Keep hitting the wrong button. Right?
Yep, I see.
Then it goes and it turns back. And goes the other direction.
Yep, and now it's on this side of us compared to the sun.
Yep.
Okay.
That is what we call retrograde.
So half
when
of
Mercury
the time
changes direction and goes basically backwards. So it's moving in a direction, it stops, it appears to like slow down, turn around, and then it'll come back and go that same direction again. Now, Mercury is pretty extreme because it's so close to the sun that it almost has just like a back and forth motion. Whereas a lot of the others, like Jupiter or Saturn, will mostly go in one direction and then it'll kind of turn a little bit and then go back the rest of the way again because of the Earth in its orbit. Because when we're looking out, so the Earth goes around faster than, say, Jupiter does. And so Jupiter's out here and the Earth is here.
Yeah.
Right. So it's going to be moving across, moving across, moving across, moving across. We catch up to it. Now we move around the other way. And now it looks like Jupiter's moving the opposite way from our perspective. Now we catch up again and it's still moving. So that's what it means to be retrograde. Retro meaning backwards or behind or previous, right? And grade, I don't know, grade.
That's such
But
a
like it's moving
stretch to even
backwards.
call that backwards though, because it's still going in one orbit.
Well,
It's
but
just we're
from our
watching a different
perspective,
part of the orbit.
yes, but remember, a lot of these things, especially when it comes to astronomy, come from thousands of years ago when people observed the night sky and didn't know what they were looking at. And so you have that name retrograde because it was moving and then it turned around and then it went forward again. So it looked like it was moving backwards. It was moving
Oh my
retrograde,
goodness. So what I'm
right? And
hearing
so
is it is self-centered and an old way of thinking.
no, that's not what I said.
But that sounds like such an old way of thinking to me, like, because it's backwards. It's like, well, it's backwards compared to like us, but it's not all about
Yeah,
us.
no, and that's true, but it is still something that we observe. We do
Sure.
still observe that motion,
Okay.
and
I'm
it's
thinking
something
about
that we have to explain.
astrology. And
Oh, I
in
know what you're thinking of.
and that's what makes it feel like, I don't know.
Right. So it is a real thing.
Yes.
Mercury can be in retrograde. Jupiter can be in retrograde.
Yeah.
What's not a real thing is that has any influence on our lives whatsoever.
Yeah. I think probably less influence than the moon does.
Oh, yeah, because it's farther away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for showing me that. And thank you for
You're
answering
welcome.
my 31 questions. I do have a podcast reflection for you
Oh, okay. I did not know
because
this was coming.
each unit you've done a unit reflection for me as a student,
Yeah.
as a learner.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
I want to know, you in your profession are a
Mm-hmm.
teacher and on this
Yep.
podcast are also a teacher. So I
Yep.
want you to think about your time on this podcast
Okay.
and let me know what are some things as a teacher that you found interesting.
What are the things as a teacher that I found interesting? There are
Yeah.
several. One would be sometimes the amount that you don't know. And
Yeah.
you've said that before too. You're like, I literally don't know anything about that. And so that sometimes that's a little surprising to me. Not all the time, but sometimes like, oh, okay, you don't even know that piece. Okay, we can go back to there. You're not in a like, I can't believe you don't know that. But
Yeah.
it one of the things that is hard as a teacher, one of the things that is hard as an expert in whatever the thing is you're an expert in, and I probably shouldn't use the word expert because I don't think I'm an expert, but when you know more about a thing than the average person knows about that thing, it's easy to forget what things people don't know, what is common knowledge and what isn't. So I think that's interesting. Also interesting for me was your ability to make connections when we would talk about one thing in one lesson and then another thing like 5 lessons later, and you would tie it back. And your ability to reason your way to a reasonable conclusion, especially in those pre-assessments. I would ask you something like, I have no idea. And then you would start to think and you would say, well, if it's this way and then this thing, and then that sort of makes sense and whatever, because I don't see that very much in my classroom. And I think there's a couple reasons for that. I think one, it's because the people I'm dealing with are younger. They have just less life experience to be able to do some of that reasoning. And two, I also think most of the time when people do that reasoning, they do it internally, not externally. So I know that I have students who are doing that, but they're doing that in their head. They're not saying that out loud. And because you and I are having this as a dialogue-ish, you're sharing those things and I'm forcing you to share those things in your thinking and to make that visible in a sense so that we can see that and experience that. And so that part I think was cool.
That's so cool. What are some things that you found challenging?
You're basically just turning it right back around on me.
Yes, I'm literally reading the questions that you asked me.
I think some of the things that have been challenging about this podcast for me is sometimes not going into as much detail as I might want to. Sometimes figuring out the best way to explain something without all the background information. As a teacher, I build the background information so that when we get to the topic, I know which information the students have to pull from and that I can reference. Whereas often in our lessons, I can reference some things, but a lot of things I can't. So I have to approximate or find a different way to explain it that doesn't require that background information or whatever. That was definitely a challenge. I think because accuracy matters to me a lot, there's been an underlying fear of mine this whole time that I'm going to misexplain something or say something wrong or get one of my facts wrong or whatever. And so I think that has been a challenge for me as well, both to recognize that I am going to get things wrong because I'm not perfect and I don't have a perfect understanding about all of these things, but also to do my due diligence when I can to look things up and see if I know the answers. That was one of the things you probably noticed even in this lesson, where I gave a few more of those caveats with things because I wasn't allowed to look stuff up, which normally I double check and I spend time. We cut that out of our episodes, but I spend sometimes 20 minutes or like looking things up and double checking and trying to find these things to make sure that what I think is true is actually true and, whatever. So, that was definitely a challenge for me.
Cool. That's really interesting. The final question we usually have is what concepts do you think you might remember or stick with you? So we could say this would be teaching concepts or maybe like something about science that you learned in this process. Kind of however you want to interpret that question.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that came to my mind is neither of the things that you said.
That's okay.
But would be for like, which units do I remember the most?
Yeah.
And for me, hot and cold is one that stands out to me a lot. I think one, because it was really fun, at least for me, I really enjoyed it because it's, and I hope this isn't insulting, but to me, it's relatively simple. I don't think we were really explaining super complex things.
Yeah.
But also it's very foundational. The ideas in that unit, I think, are really helpful in understanding lots of things about the world around us. And there was a little bit of physics and there was a little bit of chemistry and there was a little bit of biology. Like there are little bits of everything. So I think that one was really cool. So that's definitely one that stuck out to me. Obviously the solar system one, because I really like astronomy. Like that one was fun. Also, I think the houseplants one was one that was really unique and really fun and asking questions about biology that not necessarily in the way that I always would have thought about them, which I think was interesting for me and fun for me. Those are the ones that at least that stand out for me. Not that the other ones weren't interesting or weren't enjoyable, but those are the ones that come to mind first when I think back on our podcast.
Nice. That's awesome. And finally, what does your shirt say and what does it mean?
So it says, and you can't probably see the bottom of it. So you're missing the punchline. No, I can only see
the top text box.
Yeah. So one of my sisters got this from me. So it's 2 atoms and one atom is saying, I lost an electron. And the other atom is saying, are you positive? It's a science pun. But also, the reason Carrie got it for me also is because this is the shirt that Peter Parker wears in the first of the newer Spider-Man movies. Yeah, Tom Holland wears this shirt and I never remember because they're all similar names. Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man Far From Home, Spider-Man I Want to Go Home. I don't remember what they all have to do with home. Whichever one was the first one. I think he wears it in that one, I think. So
that's so fun. I love it.
It's both a comic book nerd.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not really a comic book nerd, but like, Marvel comic book, but also it's a science joke. a science pun, which I love a good pun. So
Love it. So fun.
yeah.
Well, Ryan.
Yes, Cheryl.
This is all the time we have for you to teach me things.
I will no longer teach you anything ever again.
Great. Sounds amazing. But this has been lovely, and I'm going to miss this so much. But yeah.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for being willing to be vulnerable and to ask questions that sometimes I know felt stupid, but I don't think ever were. And thank you to our listeners who have listened along with us and hopefully learned a few things and enjoyed it. The good news or bad news, depending on your perspective, is it's on the internet, which means we're still here, even though we're not still here. We are out there in the world. And so you can go back. If you're just finding us here at the end, we've got lots of other episodes, both on YouTube and on whatever podcast thing you want to listen to, Spotify, whatever. We would love you to still listen, but that's it for us. We're done.
Yep.
Let's clean up the classroom and go home.
All right.
You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at I Slept Through Science or on Twitter at Slept Science.
If you have dumb science questions like I do, please send them to us. You can email us at isleptthroughscience@gmail.com, or you can even send us a voice memo and we'll play it on the podcast.
Please rate and review our podcast to tell other people what you think about it, subscribe to make sure you don't miss an episode, and share about our podcast on social media.
Thank you to Beth Reed Miller for the artwork. You can check out more of Beth's artwork at Beth Is Something. Okay, great. Thanks. Bye.
The bell doesn't dismiss you. I dismiss you.